What I do matters. The joy I derive from my work matters.
Now women are earning. When they are earning, they will not take any shit from anybody.
I think the word compromise is very frivolously used in terms of marriage. It's very convenient ways.
There are so many ways you can live your life, and getting married is not the only way.
There's a classic script that every girl is groomed from the very day that she's born. Boy meets girl, they fall in love, they get married and live happily ever after. This script may work for some, but for many, it is a huge letdown. Some women are let down by intimate partner violence or marital rape, while many others are let down because they have to give up their ambitions and careers in a bid to be the good wife. But go behind the smoke screen that this is the most important day of every woman's life, and you'll realize how marriage inherently is a very anti-woman institution. If Indian shadis have their kanyadans and bidais, the Western versions have the giving away of the daughter by the father, somehow making marriage sound like a contract as opposed to the meeting of two lovers. So, bridehood turns out to be a parade of beauty standards, and wifehood turns out to be an effort in learning adjustment and compromise. Even as Netflix normalizes or dignifies the idea of matchmaking, one must think about women who are breaking away from that script, either with equal and feminist marriages or by simply challenging the whole notion of wifehood as their immediate and only goal. So on the show, we're going to catch up with a few bad brides who are questioning that system and challenging the entire idea. Well, joining me now is improv and stand-up comedian Kaneez Surka. You've often joked about this. I think that, growing up, you were always obsessed with the idea of marriage because everybody around you was obsessed with the idea of marriage.
Yeah, I was basically told that that's your end goal, right? Get married. That's when society will validate you, when you're a married woman. Until then, you can have fun, you can do whatever you want, but at the end, you have to get married, right? So I always saw my life from that perspective, and I was looking forward to getting married, and I was looking forward to being a housewife. By the way, I was a housewife for 3 years. And I chose that for myself. And in my head, I was like, this is the perfect life. It's crazy that I used to.
You have this script. I don't know if Marvelous Mrs. Maisel was written with you in mind. What revelations shook that up for you?
I guess an overall feeling of like, I don't think this is the life that I want. And as I started getting more into comedy, I was like, I have a feeling there's another life that I need to be living. I didn't know that was possible because I was told that marriage was the end goal. And then when I did get married, I was like, wait, this can't be it. This doesn't feel like the end of my life. I don't want this to be where I reach. Like I was told again and again and again that behind every successful man, there is a supportive wife. And that's the role I thought I would play. And that's the role I was prepared to play. And at one point, I think this was after my marriage when I realized, wait a minute, why can't I be the supportive woman behind my own life?
To me, this bad bride thing was like everybody was like, oh my God, now what?
Now what? That's the thing. It's almost like I wasn't valid before I got married. I was this person just existing just to get married. And then I got married and then I got divorced. While I was married, they were like, everyone's like, Kaneez, she is a member of our society. And then I got divorced and I went back to like not being valid anymore. It's small things like, this is such a dumb thing, but like I'd go to a destination wedding. When I was married, I would get my own room with my husband. And then when I got divorced, I had to share with my parents. Like you are your parents' daughter again. It made me feel like I wasn't my own person. Like either I had to be attached to a man or I'm attached to my parents. I'm like, when do I get my own room? When do I get my own room?
Where did you think in hindsight things just tend to go wrong? Because they just sometimes enter it with like these little glitter blinders.
A lot of people also entered for security. I didn't think I had it in me to financially support myself. That was actually a really big reason that I don't actually talk about often. But like more than just the idea of being married, I was like, I will be taken care of. And then, breaking that, like coming out of that and then starting my own career and then realizing, wait, I do have it in me. to financially support myself. If I choose to get into it again, it won't be because someone can emotionally or financially support me.
Oh, that's a brilliant takeaway. We so often put the idea of the independent woman and the connection to money as if we can't go there. We just can't talk about money.
So the funniest thing is that when I started being successful in my career and making a living and a really good living, that's when people started validating me again. I was like, oh, basically I just had to turn into a man, essentially.
You earlier mentioned that I was a housewife for 3 years.
Yeah.
What were the most interesting moments of that? And by interesting, I mean for yourself.
I think like the idea of living with somebody, which I still have, by the way, the idea of living with someone, coming home to someone, that kind of really intrigued me. Just having someone to look after me financially and emotionally. Like I do want to be a mother. Like the idea of like having a family and maybe having a little bit of what I had in my childhood. That's all I knew. That's what I thought. I thought that was the only option for me. I didn't think there were other options. I don't need marriage. I don't need marriage.
So Kaneez talks about having companionship for life. She'd love to have a partner, but doesn't believe that marriage has to be the institution defining how that partner and that relationship plays out. I also caught up with Masaba Gupta. She talks about those who are making choices for marriage or against it. But she also points out to a very important aspect that we often forget in relationships, that of respect. Indian society in many ways validates marriages as a reason to go out there and have a child. Masaba even questions that. Do we really need an institution to define our desire to have a child?
You know, I used to think, Shaili, that times are changing and that societies are becoming much more open-minded. People are becoming much more open-minded. But I feel like somewhere things are going a bit in reverse. You know, sometimes I talk to people I know, some very liberated women and men, very educated, well-traveled, who have seen a marriage, been in painful marriages. Everybody seems to believe that that is the only and most natural progression in a woman's life. I just think it's a cultural thing. I think we're so deeply rooted to the tradition of marriage in this country that we feel like, you know, abhi 30 ki ho gayi, abhi nahi to 33 ki ho gayi, 35 ki ho gayi, ab to kar lo shaadi. You know what I mean? So it's that. I mean, I understand the idea of getting married for the idea of companionship when you're older. I don't understand it for when you want to have a baby. I know people who have been in abusive marriages just because they feel like, you know, they can't raise a child together or the child will get a bad name. And I'm not for once saying that, you know, a marriage is meant to be hunky-dory and fairy tale for the whole period of it. But the idea is that at least it should be one of mutual respect. I have just one idea, that is respect. I could be in a live-in relationship with a lot of respect. I could be single and co-parent with a friend who's male and have a lot of respect. I think we're still 10, 15, maybe 20 years behind in opening up to different types of relationship.
Yeah. Neena ji, you know, one of the ideas that's central to the idea of making marriages or not having marriages important is also how we normalize the idea of a separation, of a divorce. In that sense, do you think, drawing on your personal experiences, India is moving a bit towards normalizing it?
It will take centuries for us to go in that direction because what we are talking about, you and me are talking about, is maybe 0.001% of our population. But now very bad time is going to come because now women are earning, and when they are earning, they will not take any shit from anybody. So marriages will break a lot. What I have seen around me is still it's the same वही series वाली mother-in-law, same है, सब कुछ same है. It's changing very little, which is very nice. It is changing at least. When they are financially independent, then how will marriages work? They will work only when men change their outlook towards marriage, towards being with a woman. It will take decades कि वो काम भी कर सके, financially independent भी हो सके, और they can have a good family life also with the husband and with the mother-in-law and father-in-law, whosoever. That is going to take a long time.
But onward now to Alankrita Shrivastava, who directed Lipstick Under My Burqa, Dolly Kitty or Chamakte Sitare, and many others, believes that the institution is highly centered around men, and it's time for us to rethink whether we do need institutions to define our existence in society. Alankrita Shrivastava, thanks for joining us here on Sisterhood with Shaili. Got a lot of focus on young women who are approaching their lives so differently. As the person who wrote Made in Heaven, I really want to know how you think young women are approaching the whole idea of marriage today.
There is a whole trend of women getting married later, which I think is probably a good thing because you might know your mind better, when you're a bit older. It's nice to see that there are more women who are willing to, maintain focus on their own growth and development even when they're getting married, because I think often there has been this tendency of putting your husband's career before yours. But having said that, I still feel that sometimes it really is a patriarchal trap, and I sometimes shudder to think that young women still can't see that, and they still aspire for it in that very Mills and Boonish kind of way. And making marriage a life goal, I feel, is not great in a setup which doesn't favor equality.
Do you believe in the institution of marriage?
I mean, of course, there's companionship and all of that, which is, I think, the wonderful thing in starting, people having families together and all of that. The burden of housework, cooking, all of that, why is it still falling on women? They're the ones who are more responsible for their kids doing their Zoom classes. And I feel like one guy will do one magic mop, once a day, and everyone's like, oh, wow. So I feel those kind of things just make you feel like, however equal it seems, I still feel and I still see around me a lot of women sacrificing their dreams. It's rare to find a situation where the man is as supportive of his wife's career as she is of his career. Honestly, I'm not a prime example. I think my main problem is that the way it functions is very lopsided.
Alankrita, hold that thought. I have joining us now Ankita Bansal, who featured in Indian matchmaking as the woman who not only had her own business, her own life, and an independent way of thinking, but truly believed that marriage shouldn't be a milestone for women and shouldn't be engaged in just because you're growing old in the eyes of society.
Ankita Bansal, thanks very much for joining us here on Sisterhood. The construct of marriage itself seems very anti-woman. And historically, it's been sort of an arrangement between families so that the bloodlines could stay put, right?
Yeah.
But that is purely questionable.
When you say the whole concept of marriage has been very anti-women, it's so contradictory because a house and a marriage cannot possibly run without a woman.
In one way, clearly, because she manages so much.
In my family, to me, marriage is equality. To me, marriage is friendship, because I've seen that with my parents. I've seen a very balanced relationship as partners. Of course, I want to get married, but it needs to come out of a place of equality. It can't come out of a place of, oh, Ankita is getting old, so maybe Ankita needs to settle down with just the next person who comes away. I don't think I'm going to be able to adjust to that thought at all.
The word compromise may have come through many times in Indian matchmaking, but there's nothing new about the fact that it's actually touted by parents, in-laws, matchmakers, what have you. What do you think that word does to the idea of marriage?
I think the word compromise is very frivolously used in terms of marriage. It's very convenient ways. If it's convenient for a man, then that compromise is worth it. But if that compromise favors a woman, then that compromise is not worth the pain. After being in relationships also with men, I realized that it's never a fair compromise, because a fair compromise is something that the pros and the cons for each individual in that relationship have been weighed out properly. It benefits both.
Joining me now is Rytasha Rathore, who's an actor and active podcaster, but most famous for her role on television as a chubby bahu on the Indian daily soap Bado Bahu. She, of course, won hearts and fans with a performance despite facing all kinds of criticism from the various characters in the show, including her husband. Rytasha talks about why women may look at marriage as a milestone and how it's high time that we start recognizing the importance of sharing the load, sharing the work between women and men when it comes to making relationships equal. We are all talking about marriages as goals, and a large number of us, despite all the changing years, haven't stopped thinking about that as being a very important milestone. Do you think that this is just disillusionary as an idea?
That marriage is a goal? I don't think it's entirely not based in any kind of reality. So I'm going to talk about happy marriages specifically, because I feel like a happy marriage can really bring out the best in a person and create a support system for, you just need, I'm one of those people who believes that you need companionship and support to like ground you. And then, yeah, of course, you need the freedom to do whatever the hell you want to do with your own life also. I think it's important to find partnership and companionship. This label of marriage or forcefully getting married or marrying just for the sake of it or marrying someone for reasons other than love and togetherness, I don't agree with. So that's why I say, like, if you ever wanted to get married, make sure you're financially independent, you really love this person, and you're still going to focus on your own growth even after you get married. Yeah.
Women, especially young women, wanting to do this differently.
Yeah.
There are lots of them who are saying, hey, I'm going to like not have tam jam. I'm not going to do that entourage kind of shadi. I want to take a simple holiday. This is a partnership. We'll both be in the kitchen. Those possibly are a bit of a hope, even if they are labeled as bad brides.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those girls, I guess. So I haven't been married, but the closest I've come to being in that kind of a domestic situation, I've been living with my partner for the last 2 years. And I kind of get that. It's equal. You share the load, man. You help each other at every point. And in the lockdown, so yeah, of course, we've been cooking together. He's been cleaning. I've been doing something. And it's just that you have to, I think these young girls and their hopes are very on point, because I think young boys, young men are also waking up to the fact maybe that this is a equal partnership.
You think it's very hard for the previous generation and maybe even our parents to take that? Like, I wonder, it wasn't easy for my parents, for example, to see my husband in the kitchen and me sitting and enjoying my drink.
Yeah.
So that's like, and these are my parents, you know what I mean? Maybe the parents of women need to get a lot more open-minded than we expect even the mother-in-law angles to emerge before.
So in my family, it's my dad, my mom, my sister and I. And this lockdown has been testing for my parents, because my dad, who's never had to make the bed or do the laundry or mop the floor in 30 years of marriage, has had to do it for the first time. And of course, the first week, it was really hard for him. But by the end of lockdown, like the week before their staff was allowed to come back and all, he was like, I'll do the pocha in 15 minutes flat. And he's like a pro. He's figured it out. He knows this is the bucket. This is my pocha. This is my system. And he's better for it now. But at age 55, he has learned this new skill. He has 3 women in his house telling him, you gotta do this. Yeah. You can't be watching television while we're doing the work. No, that's not how it works. No, I think your family has to push you.
So it's one thing to think about relationships in its traditional construct, but also as the idea of the relationship changes, as we all discover our sexuality and our identities, and then find our own partners. How does the entire approach towards a concept of marriage change? Joining me now is Kavita Arora, who's a psychiatrist, a child therapist, mental health therapist. She's also in a same-sex partnership. So Kavita, thank you so much for joining us. First off,
my pleasure.
The idea of marriage itself, the institution as we call it, is sort of defined very much so by heterosexuals, seem to have that sort of an umbrella through and through. Would you agree with that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's been my personal experience, Shaili, that even as I grew up, the idea of marriage was about a man marrying a woman, a girl marrying a boy. And in fact, I would go so far as to say that the idea of a family was a man, woman, with 2 children, one being a boy and one being a girl. That is the idea of a complete stereotype, complete family. And that's what we grew up with. Right now, of course, my ideas have changed because I discovered over a period of time that I was not attracted to men. And I have been in a same-sex partnership for the last 8 years. And we are very much happily together. But the concept of marriage or the definition of marriage doesn't include such a relationship, at least in our culture right now. I realized that not till a few months ago I ever conceived of the idea of, is marriage even a possibility for someone like me? And this was around just before COVID times, when we were thinking about if one of us fell sick, how would the other person be placed in terms of this arrangement? And we realized that legally, there is no automatic assignation of assets or finances to the other person. We started off on the project of trying to figure out what I could do, for example, if I wanted a joint account. What could I do if we needed to be co-owners of an apartment, if we were not legally married?
You have to have. Okay.
You can, but it goes through a particular process. You can't have a joint account between 2 people who are not related. If you have a life insurance, for example, the nominee has to be somebody who's blood related. In mutual funds, till a short time ago, till the RBI ruled otherwise, you could not nominate someone who was not blood related. So the husband, son, wife, daughter, brother, sister relationship. Now it is, but most companies don't advertise it. Therefore, it's not as easy as for everyone else, where you do a drop-down menu online and you assign a nominee. You have to go, you have to get it done and all of that. So what we started realizing when we started looking at trying to figure out how to make each other secure, we realized that the automaticity that another couple who was married and therefore was next of kin to each other did not exist for us. So I think from there, it also started, we also started realizing, do we need to have a will? What do we need to do?
In fact, I want to ask you whether you were compelled to think about this because the idea of marriage just sort of brings closure of some sort.
That was not my idea at all. If I explain to you how my mind has worked, it's almost like saying if we are living in a house, or if everyone lives in a house with 3 rooms, I have lived in a house with 1 room. So the possibility or the definition of marriage was not available in my mind to me. So even the option of saying I would like to get married to someone who's of the same sex did not exist inside me in my entire mind space. So this is how entrenched and stereotyped we are. And I'm talking about myself. I was very happy that I had the good fortune and privilege of being in a place where I could exist in a same-sex partnership. The idea of legally being married never occurred to me.
What was your thinking behind wanting to pursue this?
Pursuing the idea of marriage is more about sort of trying to figure out, is there a legal possibility right now? Because the courts don't allow it. The idea of same-sex marriage in India is about that you have to appeal to the court for permission to get married. Nobody else has to appeal to a court to take permission to get married. If you're a heterosexual couple, Ankita and I are both wondering and planning about actually pursuing this legally and maybe petitioning the court to actually get married. We have the same rights as every other citizen in the country, according to Section 377. Then why not the right to marriage as well? Despite the fact that we are happy together, there is something that we didn't realize was missing. And that is part of our fundamental right. I think our education and awareness about it now doesn't let me look past it. And that if we as a couple are able to talk about it a little bit more, maybe it will help some others.
Yeah.
I do want security for both of us, and so does she. And we don't see any other way of getting it.
And so perhaps it is time for us to rewrite that script, explore our own selves and desires, and completely question what the institution of marriage has really meant for us.